Something scraped under my door and knocked my mug off the counter in the same instant. I bent, caught the mug by its rim, and saw a narrow white envelope tucked under the jam. Suspicion rose in me before I even opened it. The prickling between my shoulder blades told me someone had crossed a line. I slid the envelope free and found a printed photograph folded inside, my face beside Marcus Reed's at a coffee table 2 years earlier, and a small handwritten date on the back. I did not call anyone at once. I put the photo down on the kitchen table and felt for my phone with a hand that shook. The sound of the street was muffled, the clock over the sink reading midnight. I walked to the window, pulled the blind aside, and looked down at empty pavement. I wanted answers. The photograph made the question sharp. Who had followed me and why now? I woke Lena. I banged on her door so the noise had purpose and not panic. "Lena," I said when she opened, breathless in a sweater, hair in a knot. "Someone slid this under my door." Lena took the envelope with 2 fingers and turned it over slowly. "Evelyn." Lena, voice low, "that looks recent. The edges are damp. Who would leave this now?" Her eyes moved to the date. "Who is Marcus again?" "Marcus Reed," I said. I said his name like a rough stone. "We lived together. We didn't end well. He left 3 years ago." I set the photograph on the table and watched Lena lift her chin. Suspicion pushed me forward. I could feel it steering my hands. I needed to know whether this was a threat, a mistake, or a message. Lena did what she always does, practical checks. She held the envelope to the lamp, tapped it, and slid a corner open with a kitchen knife. The photograph inside smelled faintly of rain. She pointed to the fold where a fine line of mud had dried. "Someone came by tonight," she said, "not long ago. Whoever left this left prints." Her words made everything sharper, not softer. We searched the apartment together. I opened the drawer where I kept my worn leather journal. The journal's spine creaked along the shelf when I pulled it free. A folded locksmith receipt slipped out from between pages, half obscured by a pressed receipt for tea. The receipt had a time stamp from last month, and an unfamiliar name printed in block letters across the top. "Marcus." Lena slowly, "Does that name mean anything now?" I held the receipt until the edges warmed from my fingers. The receipt did not answer. It was proof of someone entering, not proof of motive. I heard the key turn at my front door before I reached it. Marcus was on the other side, his voice saying, "Evelyn, are you all right?" He sounded careful in that measured baritone I remembered. He looked like he always had: navy jacket, that heavy watch, dark hair threaded with silver at the temples, but his stance had distance in it now. "Marcus," I said. My tone was short. "Why are you here?" I held the photograph up so he could see his own face. He glanced at the photo, and then at the envelope on the floor. He set his briefcase down and did not take off his jacket. "I came because I heard someone was at your door," he said. "Lena called me." He folded his hands as if bracing. "I came to help." Lena looked between us. "Marcus, this locksmith receipt was inside Evelyn's journal. The envelope smelled like it was delivered tonight." Her eyes were level. "Who has keys to her place?" Marcus's jaw tightened. He had the habit of checking his watch when words went long. "I didn't have keys." "I didn't." He stopped. The sentence hung unfinished. I heard the hesitation as a change in the room's temperature. Doubt shifted into unease. I asked him directly, "Did you come by my apartment last month? Did you give a key to anyone?" My voice did not waver as much as my hands did. "Marcus, no, I did not give a key. I haven't been inside your apartment in years." He looked down at his briefcase, then back to me. "But I did order a locksmith once. When we argued and you were locked out. I kept the receipt. Maybe that is what you were finding." Lena found the small brass key later, under the dish of spare change by the sink. It fell into her palm like an accusation. The tag looped around it bore initials that matched the brass plate on Marcus's briefcase. Marcus went white when he saw the key. He moved before either of us could stop him, reaching into his jacket and pulling out the heavy watch he always fingered when uneasy. "This isn't mine tonight, Marcus. I swear. I kept one key. I did not come here last week. If someone had another, I didn't know." His sentences were short. They landed like knocks against a locked door. The next event changed the tone faster than words. A single figure appeared below on the back fire escape, a silhouette pressing at the kitchen window. Lena's hand went to her phone. Marcus lunged for the balcony door. I followed with the camera in my pocket, out of habit, and paused when I saw a man climb, one hand in a coat pocket, the other gripping the rusted metal. Rain had left the steps slick. He reached the second rung and froze. Looking up. "Who are you?" Marcus called from the doorway. The sound was both demand and warning. The man above did not answer. He pressed his forehead to the glass as if testing it. Then he turned and jammed the window with something metallic. Marcus slammed the sliding door open and pushed past me. He moved like a man who had practiced this exact motion at some point, forward and then to the side to intercept the intruder's center of balance. The man's shoulder hit Marcus's chest. Lena shouted, "Call the police," and grabbed my phone. Her thumb trembled when she dialed. The scuffle was brief and blunt. Marcus wrapped an arm around the intruder's neck and shoved him against the railing. The man cursed, a low sound, and tried to twist free. I saw the flash of a face under a hood, a narrow jaw stubble, and eyes that darted without settling. He pulled a small knife and it slid from his hand when Marcus knocked his wrist. The knife clattered across the balcony planks. I reached for the railing and felt the wood under my palms. My pulse hammered. Fear moved through me as physical heat, making my palms slick. Fear pushed my feet to step forward and keep distance at the same time. I said Marcus's name so it was an anchor. "Marcus, get him down," I said. My voice sounded steadier than the breath inside my throat. Marcus tightened his grip and said, "Stay back, Evelyn. Move inside." He did not look like an ally in those seconds. He looked like someone whose legs had practiced preventing a fall. The intruder's foot slipped on the wet step, and he tumbled inside the balcony door. He landed between the kitchen table and the armchair, and Lena put herself in front of him with the phone still clutched in her hand. The man tried to scramble. Marcus pinned him with a forearm across the shoulder and called, "You tell me who sent you, who gave you the date." The intruder spat at Marcus and said, "I don't know names. I was paid. I was told to check if she kept things. I was told to watch." His words came hurried and thin. "I was told to leave a photo." He kept his gaze on the floor and would not meet me. Detective Alvarez arrived before I could think through the equation. She had a badge and a way of speaking that cut small motions into clear commands. "Everyone step back," she ordered. She took the knife, the photograph, and the brass key. She quick-pointed questions. "Who lives here? Who owns this key?" Her tone made the room line up like pieces. Marcus the detective his name and then answered, "I knew Evelyn. We were together. I resigned from the idea of us 2 years ago. I have nothing to do with hiring anyone." He this without flourish. His measured voice carried the old distance. Detective Alvarez looked at me and asked, "Evelyn Hart, do you want a report filed? Do you want us to take out protective orders?" She wrote as she spoke. The shape of procedure steadied something raw in the room. I felt the scene like a series of tasks. Lena sat on the counter, elbows on knees. "Evelyn," she said, "you should come to my place tonight. We'll lock your windows. We'll check the locks." She named practical things as if building a wall. That kind of practicality has always been Lena's gift. Marcus stepped closer, and I saw him decide. "I will come with you to the precinct. I will answer questions. I will turn over anything they ask for. I will let them check my briefcase." There was a moment when his voice changed from distant to concrete. That was an emotion shift I noticed. Suspicion into willingness to explain. He was not asking forgiveness. He was offering facts. "Detective Alvarez, the intruder, who paid you?" The man swallowed and said, "I don't know names. Cash, an unmarked car. A corner under the bridge." The detective's pen scratched faster. "Can you identify who gave you the key?" she asked. The intruder looked at Marcus and then away. "No. I was handed envelopes and told where to leave them." He breathed in quick, broken pulls and then spat. "But I saw him once. He had a heavy watch. He drove a dark sedan with chrome trim. He looked at me like I was a tool." The room shifted. Lena muttered, "That's Marcus's watch." "He always had a heavy watch." Marcus took a step back. I watched the muscle around his jaw tighten, and then relax into a new posture. He quietly, "Detective, check my car. Check my watch logs. I will cooperate." That was another shift, from defensive to proactive. The detective wrote his offer down but did not show surprise. Detective Alvarez escorted everyone to give statements. Lena pushed my sweater straight as if smoothing a crease in time. Marcus rode with us to the precinct, sitting apart in the back seat like a man who measured space. I answered questions about entries, receipts, the old journal, the locket missing a tiny clasp. Each detail pulled me further into an inventory of what had been left behind. At the precinct, the intruder corrected some of his answers. He named a different corner under a different bridge. He added a detail. There had been a woman with the driver, a woman with a scar on her brow. My skin prickled because I have a faint crescent scar on my left eyebrow, and it showed if you looked. The intruder's description made something knot inside me. He was either clumsy and truthful or precise and cruel. Both possibilities pushed me to act. Marcus sat beside me in the waiting room. He kept his hands folded, his posture rigid. He finally said, "Evelyn, when I left, I thought leaving was better for both of us. I didn't think anyone would do this." His voice had a flat rope of regret. "I didn't come back because I thought distance was safer. If someone followed you now, I want to know who it is." I asked, "Why did you leave at all?" Marcus, the question landed like a hinge. He answered in short, even sentences, because I needed certainty. Because you were uncertain about what you wanted and I was building a life that needed decisions. I didn't mean to hurt you. Our exchange turned the corridor into a place of small, revealing motions. He leaned forward and said, Evelyn, I am not proud of how I left. I'm telling you that now because I want to be clear. If someone tied my watch to this, I will prove you wrong. He named his intent with that clipped clarity. When the detective returned, she gave us a thin file. The intruder had been released on a summons. He had nothing to hold him. The detective said, we will keep watch on your block. We'll check the setive under the bridge. For now, lock your doors and try not to be alone tonight. She met Marcus and added, if you can provide a full account of your movements, do it now. Marcus nodded. Back at my apartment, I held the old locket and turned it in my palm. It fit the curve of my finger like a memory with edges. Marcus watched me do this and said, Evelyn, why keep it? I set it on the counter and said, because I kept thinking I'd open it one day and find the answer. The way I spoke wasn't a lecture. It was a small admission. The detective's presence had created a temporary structure of safety, but the key and the receipt still sat on the table. Night stretched in practical ways. Locking windows, taping a spare key to Lena's inside door, checking the chain on my front door. Each action cut a path through fear into something concrete. I made a list of what I would do if the stranger returned. I wrote it down in the worn journal. The pen scratched across paper and the list read like a map of precautions. Call Lena, go to precinct, change locks, keep locket with me. Halfway through the night, Marcus and I argued in the hallway outside my apartment in low, quick lines. It was not a romantic fight. It was two people sorting responsibility and regret. Marcus, how long did you keep the receipt? I asked. Longer than I should have, he said. I kept things out of habit. I kept the receipt because I thought it might matter. I never planned someone to use it. He spoke with a cadence that matched his measured baritone. But you could have told me earlier, I said. You could have shown up before someone started slinging photographs under doors. My words were short and to the point. He answered, you rewrite. I should have said something. I'm sorry, words did not resolve the room. They changed the shape of our choices. I felt my suspicion harden into distrust, then soften when he offered facts. I felt an emotion shift again, suspicion to guarded openness. The mid-chapter event came like a small cliff, a call from the bank. My voice wavered when I answered. The banker on the other end said, Ms. Hart, we flagged an attempt to access your account from a device we don't recognize. Lena's hand covered the receiver, as if to hide the sound. Marcus stared at the counter and then at me. Who would want your accounts? He asked. His question was practical. The bank's detail forced us to think of motive. The photograph could be a threat. It could also be an attempt to find something tangible. The bank's call made the suspicion into a ledger of possible losses. I called the bank back with Lena and Marcus in the room. I changed passwords and set alerts. We made another list. Each item was small, but each one pushed me toward a decision. I would not simply wait while someone arranged my life through envelopes. In the early hours, Detective Alvarez called to say the sac de vivre under the bridge had a blurry feed, but there was a dark sedan at the time, the intruder claimed. The feed showed a person with a heavy watch stepping from the back seat. The detective said, it's not definitive, but it's worth checking. We'll trace ownership of the sedan. We all sat with that sliver of evidence like it was a hinge. Marcus, check my car. If I were careless, I will prove I was not. I will hand over my logs, my parking receipts. I will show you where I was on that date. He folded his hands again and did not look theatrical. I watched to see whether his offer was a bridge or an attempt at absolution. Detective Alvarez left with a promise to return with updates. Lena helped me tape the journal closed and tuck the locket into my bag. Evelyn, promise me you will sleep at my place tonight. I'll have coffee waiting in the morning. She it like a plan. Marcus offered to come with us and watch the stairwell. I chose my own action in the small hour before dawn. I packed the journal, the locket, a toothbrush, and the photograph into a small bag. I did not dramatize the motion. I folded a sweater and set the key I kept on a chain around my neck. I locked the apartment, checked the deadbolt twice, and stepped into the street. The night air stung my eyes with cold. Lena stood at her doorway, keys in hand. Marcus stood a few steps back by the parked car. He did not touch me. He did not insist. Evelyn, I will be at the precinct if you need me. His voice was simple. I nodded. I sat in my car at the corner and did not start it. The photograph was in my lap. I looked at Marcus's face and then at the brass key now in Lena's palm. The key felt heavy. My decision had weight, too. I drew the sweater tighter and placed the journal and the locket beside me. Then I locked the car before I turned the engine on. Dawn came with a pale strip along the buildings and my hands closed around the steering wheel. The chapter ended with that locked car and my bag on the seat. A closed door behind me and a decision I had already carried out physically. I had translated suspicion into steps. The photograph the key, Marcus's tight explanations, Lena's steady help, and the detective's measured process had moved the story forward to a new beginning I could name in action. I sat and I waited for the next movement outside my window, ready to do what the list required. The dawn light hit the dashboard and I breathed once, steady and deliberate, then started the engine. I ripped the flimsy white envelope open, and the Polaroid slid out, landing face up on the tile with the exact sound of a small thing that will not be ignored. Suspicion rose in me the same way had the night the envelope first appeared under my door, a hard, steady tug across the base of my skull. And I pressed the photo down with 2 fingers to keep it from fluttering again. The image was bright and intimate in a way that made my stomach tighten. My younger face leaned against a man's shoulder, our coats damp with rain. My hair pinned the way I used to pin it when Marcus wanted me presentable for an event. The typed line on the back read, "She chose him that night." The sentence did not explain who sent it, only that someone had decided to make a private choice public. I set the photograph on the counter and reached for the kettle because motion emptied the space in my head. The gas flame hissed. The kettle sang a thin, ordinary note. In the apartment the way people live, half a mug on the drying rack, a stack of unpaid envelopes, my leather journal in the top drawer. Everything looked like proof that life had continued while one secret had sat waiting. I moved slowly because suspicion made my hands deliberate, and I did not want the photograph to slip again. 2 knocks came at the door before I could lift the kettle. Rosa's voice called, quieter than a knock but carrying the same alarm, "Evelyn, are you all right?" My throat tightened in answer more than my voice did. Rosa had been my neighbor for 9 years. She kept a container of sugar behind her door and remembered my birthday without prompting. She smelled of citrus oil and laundry when she stepped in, and she held her cardigan closed with both hands as if the gesture kept her steady. "Rosa, it's nothing, really," I said, but my voice had an edge I didn't recognize. I let her in. She went straight to the counter and picked up the Polaroid as if she owned the right to examine my life. "Where did this come from?" she asked, not looking at me, slid under the door. "Ended up here," I said. I named the physical route because naming it made it less like a rumor and more like a trespass. There was a typed sentence on the back. Rosa handed the photo back without comment and sat on the corner of a chair as if she had decided to take guard. "Don't be alone tonight," she said. And the words were simple, not melodramatic. "I'll stay until morning." I should have let her. Part of me wanted to. Instead I set the kettle on the counter and stared at the typed line again. Marcus had always been careful about a certain kind of secrecy. His life ran on schedules, meetings, and decisions made in rooms I rarely entered. For years I assumed his secrecy was about work and that the cost of privacy fell only on him. Looking at the photo, the idea that his choices might have asked me to disappear from certain nights felt like a physical bruise along my ribs. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Marcus's name filled the screen. I watched it buzz twice and then answered. "Marcus, don't bring anyone else into this," he said without greeting. His voice was measured. The baritone I had heard for years carried a new distance. "Do not look into the envelope." "Leave it alone." Suspicion pitched toward alarm at the plainness of his order. "Who sent it?" I asked. "Someone who needs to be kept quiet." Marcus, trust me on this." "Don't contact anyone. He does not raise his voice." I thought. "He never needs to." "Marcus, that is my photograph. You can't tell me not to." "Evelyn," he interrupted, "you promised me we wouldn't." His words stopped. The phrase he left unfinished had weight. My mouth went dry. "I'll come by in 20 minutes. Lock your door. Do not let anyone in." He hung up. The phone went black in my palm and I could hear my own pulse. My hands moved without permission. I slid the Polaroid under the kettle and closed the lid as if that would make the image smaller. Rosa watched me, her mouth a thin line. "He sounded." Rosa began, trying to find a word. She settled on something that wasn't a word at all. She patted my shoulder. "Marcus is Marcus, Evelyn. But you shouldn't be ordered around." "Not like that." Before I could answer, someone else knocked at the stairwell door, a firm, quick rapping that belonged to someone used to not waiting. I held my breath. A young man stepped into the hallway, coat soaked at the collar, a camera strap still damp across his shoulder. He introduced himself as Jonah and showed his press card in a way that was careful but not dramatic. His hair stuck to his forehead. He smelled faintly of rain and the metal tang of an office. "I have surveillance photos of Marcus from the 15th. Jonah." He laid a small, grainy print on the counter. He was with a woman that night. I reached for the print, and the paper felt like a new fact you cannot ignore. The photograph showed Marcus near the side entrance of a restaurant, his profile clear beneath a street lamp. Beside him, a woman in a red coat turned her face away from the camera. The timestamp was wrong by an hour, but the clothes were right. I remembered the rain that night, how Marcus had said he would be late. The memory was not a blur now. It unfolded into something specific. The coat he had left on the chair at home, the small damp patch beneath it. "Who are you?" Marcus demanded when he appeared in the stairwell, his steps fast enough to sound like someone closing a distance as quickly as possible. He stood in the doorway with his coat over one arm, the heavy watch glinting at his wrist. His jaw had the small scar that always tightened when he was assessing damage. I said Marcus's name because names make people accountable. "Marcus, what is this?" Marcus looked from Jonna to me and back. For a moment his face was controlled, then he simplified his voice into something blunt. "Jonna, you trespassing." Jonna did not move. "I'm offering Me's heart a choice. I can leave the photos and go, or I can tell a story to someone who will publish them." Marcus's mouth tightened. "Evelyn, you will listen to me. You will not give Jonna anything. You will let this go." I felt the heat in my hands like a slow alarm. Suspicion had shifted into fear. My internal direction went from wary to defensive, and I could hear my nails pressing into my palm. "Marcus, you told me to trust you about your business. What about the nights you didn't tell me?" My voice was lower than I expected. "What about this photograph?" There was a pause long enough that I started to speak again. Then Marcus stepped forward so close the light fell differently on his face. "You promised to protect our life," he said, and the words broke the quiet with demand that sounded older than both of us. I put my hand on the counter to steady myself. "I promised I would not embarrass you. I did not promise to erase myself," I said. The sentence surprised me with its bluntness. Rosa stood up abruptly. "Marcus, you can't tell her who to be," she said. Her voice cracked in a way that showed the hurt behind it. Jonah folded his arms, a young man's posture sharpened into purpose. "Evelyn, if you want help, I can keep looking. This photograph, the one you found, it connects to a night you were supposed to be with Marcus." Marcus's face hardened. "You will put those papers away, Jonah. Now. Leave." Jonah slid the print back into his coat and shook his head. "Miss Hart, you can be small and quiet and let this pass, but it will happen again. I don't know who sent the envelope, but I know what secrets look like when they rewrapped in photographs. You deserve to choose without orders." The word "deserve" landed like a stone in the kitchen. I had not heard it aimed at me in years. I had heard arrangements, plans, and practical sentences instead. Jonah's assertion moved something under my ribs, not a slogan but the physical sensation of surprise at being seen. I swallowed. Marcus's voice went cold. "Evelyn, will you do as I ask?" I held the kettle handle until my fingers ached. "No," I said. Saying it felt like breaking a small seam. "No, Marcus. I will not let someone else tell me what to do with my photograph." The apartment held a silence that was like something waiting to be measured. Marcus's jaw tightened, and for the first time in many years I saw impatience in him instead of the practiced restraint. He took a step back, then turned away without another word. He nodded to Jonah as if the nod settled some arrangement of ownership, and he left. The stairwell door closed behind him with a thud that sounded like a final decision. Rosa moved to the sink and began to rinse a mug. "Do you want me to call someone?" she asked. Her voice had the practical cadence that always calmed me. "Call Marcus back," I said. "Tell him I'll wait for him, but not to demand anything of me. Tell him I want answers." Jonah watched me with an intensity that felt like investigation. "If you want, I can follow a lead tomorrow. There's a delivery manifest for that night. I can pull logs." I opened my journal. The leather felt familiar in my lap, the strap worn where my thumb habitually rubbed. The Polaroid was back on the counter where the kettle had been. I folded the page of the journal over and then removed a pen. "Jonah," I said, "if you follow that lead, stay out of Marcus's life until I tell you to move forward. I don't want a confrontation that will make more secrets. I want facts." He nodded. "Facts first," he said, "then choices." Marcus returned less than an hour later, but he did not come inside. He stood in the doorway with rain beading on his collar and said, "I'll explain later." "Not now." "Explain now," I said. The kettle had cooled. I could feel the evening cooling in the room. "If you won't tell me, then tell Jonah. Tell Rosa. Explain why I'm not allowed to ask questions about a photograph of my life." Marcus's fingers tightened on the doorframe. "Some things stay in-house." "I will explain, Evelyn. I promise you an explanation, but not tonight." He closed the door behind him. The sound felt like a decision and also like a refusal. Jonah and Rosa exchanged glances. Jonah tapped his phone, and Rosa offered me a glass of water. I took it and felt the cool pass across the roof of my mouth, a small, concrete comfort. Later, when Jonah left with a promise to check a delivery record and Rosa finally turned off the light in the hallway to go home for the night, I sat at my kitchen table with my journal open. I took the Polaroid in both hands, smoothed its edges with my thumb, and felt the faint curl where it had been handled before. The photograph held a truth that did not match the life of evenings I had kept track of. The coat left on the chair, the dampness at the collar, the nights Marcus had said he would be late. My suspicion had become clearer and angrier. Fear had eased into a steady, hot irritation that made my jaw ache. I started to list on the paper margin what I remembered of that night. The phone that did not ring until after midnight, the smell of rain on Marcus's coat, the small dent in the living room table where he once set down a wineglass too hard. Each line was a concrete fact, not an accusation. Writing them made me feel less scattered. It turned the photograph into evidence rather than accusation. At dawn, after I had slept in a chair for a few hours and woken with my glasses on my face, there was a knock at the door so soft I could have mistaken it for the building settling. It was not in the pattern Marcus had used earlier. It was a single, deliberate knock that suggested stopping and waiting. I moved to the door and opened it a crack. Rosa peered in, face pale from the night but alert. "Someone left this for you on the stoop," she said, and handed me a narrow, white envelope identical to the first. My stomach slid like someone tugging at a loose thread in a sweater. I held the envelope and felt the same tug of suspicion that had started the night before. I sat at the kitchen table and opened it carefully. Inside was a short typed line and no photograph. "I remember you more clearly than you remember yourself." The sentence felt like a hand on the small of my back pushing me forward. I put the new envelope beside the Polaroid and closed my journal halfway over both of them. I made a decision that had the shape of a small plan. I would not let Marcus control whether I learned the truth. I would not let Jonah's evidence be the only mirror. I would follow the lead Jonah offered and keep Rosa holding the apartment key in case I needed shelter. I called Jonah and asked him to start with the delivery manifest and the timestamp records for the night of the photograph. I asked Rosa to stay available and to leave a light on near the hallway. When I slipped the Polaroid into the back pocket of my journal, I felt my hands steady. I did not say I had changed. I did not promise a grand reclamation. I closed the journal and slid the strap over it in the precise way I always had, a practiced, small motion. Then I put the journal in my bag and set the narrow white envelope on top of it, so it would be the first thing I'd see in the morning. The apartment felt quieter when I stood at the window and watched the street start to pale with dawn. My chest was not light, it was set like stone. The photograph pressed against my ribs through the leather cover, a weight I had chosen to carry. I told myself I would follow the facts tomorrow and not let fear decide for me. A faint sound came from the stairwell, different knock, measured and 3 beats. I walked to the door with the journal in my hand. Before I opened it, I put my other hand on the lock and tightened my grip. The lock was a small, concrete thing. Turning it would be a small, concrete action. I opened the door, and the chapter of that night closed on the single motion of my hand turning the lock, as someone on the stairs called my name. The sound carried into the kitchen and landed on the photograph under the kettle. I slid the journal on the table, left the envelope on top, and waited with my palm still warm on the lock. He slid the Polaroid across my kitchen table and did not wait for me to react. Suspicion tightened my throat the way it always does before a wrong thing becomes visible. Sharp, practical, impossible to ignore. Marcus Reed's hand left a wet crescent on the tabletop where the photo so stopped. He who is she, Evelyn. And the question landed like a demand. That was the first concrete problem. A photograph, his accusation, and the implication that my life had become proof in someone else's case. I reached for the Polaroid with the same careful motion I used to lift a sleeping cat. My fingers trembled, not from the cold tile but because suspicion was doing its work, sorting what I knew from what I had been shown. Suspicion drove me to check the edges of the picture, to look for fingerprints, to read the background for a clue. Marcus watched me with a measured face. He had come to my window late, slid the photo under the latch, and then opened the glass as if we were having a private negotiation. "Marcus," I said. "Naming him because naming keeps a person honest. What is this?" "Answer me, Evelyn," he said. "Who slept at your apartment that night?" My mouth closed around a memory that had felt small until then. The envelope under my door, the Polaroid on my tile, that memory had already pushed and tugged me awake 2 nights before. Now it sat between us as a visible accusation. Marcus's demand turned the private H in my chest into an immediate fight. He leaned on the sill in a way that made the cheap wood creak. The window light cut his jaw in half. I noticed the heavy watch on his wrist and the faint smell of cedar on his jacket. Those practical details, watch, jacket, scent, had always felt like the scaffolding of his life. Orderly, deliberate. You can clear this up quickly. Tell me the truth. I stalled because stall is a tool I had too often chosen. Buy time, smooth the edges, make it smaller. Suspicion pushed me toward action instead. I set the Polaroid face up and looked at the woman in the photograph. My kitchen sink behind her, my chipped mug on the counter, an angle only someone very close could have gotten. The photograph showed a moment of me I had not remembered being photographed in. That realization shifted my suspicion into a cold, steady fear. A knock at my front door cut the room like a blade. Lena's name answered the noise before I stood. Lena, my neighbor, a woman who crossed thresholds when silence felt dangerous. She knocked again, harder. Marcus's fingers tightened on the sill. Don't let anyone in, and there was an edge in his voice that was not concern. It was ownership. Lena opened the door anyway with a key she carries for emergencies. She stepped into my hallway, breath fogging as if she had run, and said, "Evelyn, are you all right?" I heard voices. Her voice was close and practical. She did not ask quietly. For the first time that night, others were present to witness the way Marcus framed the scene. Marcus, Lena, looking at him with a bluntness that does not bother to soften. "What are you doing here at midnight?" Marcus straightened. "I need answers, Lena. This is between Evelyn and me." His voice was short. He attempted to pivot the moment back to private accusation. The hallway filled with the hard noise of 3 people breathing at once. Detective Alvarez's arrival changed the shape of the room. Lena had already dialed when she'd seen the way Marcus moved, and his presence on my doorstep carried the authority of practical curiosity. He stepped into the kitchen carrying a folder and an expression like a man who had been awake all night collecting facts. "Detective Alvarez," Marcus acknowledged. The detective set the folder on the table and tapped it with a flat hand. "We came as soon as Lena called," the detective said. His voice was even. His hands moved to open a recorder. He looked at the photograph and then at me. "Who delivered this?" I said. "Someone slid it under my door. I found it on my floor 2 nights ago and again last night." I spoke in short sentences because short sentences hold less room for manipulation. Suspicion had become focus. I wanted to know where the photograph had come from, not just who wanted to use it. Detective Alvarez flipped open his folder and pulled out a printout. "We pulled metadata from the phone used to upload the image to the cloud and from the Polaroid's timestamp chip," he said. "The photo came from a device registered to a rental account, different from the account on Marcus's work devices. But the timestamp aligns with movement from a town car that matched Marcus's vehicle gas that night. We need to reconcile that." The technical terms landed in the kitchen like measured stones. Marcus's mouth tightened. He moved as if to take the printout. "That's not," he began. But the detective did not let him finish. "Marcus," the detective said, looking right at him, "you left your car at the theater that night for 2 hours. We have gate logs." The sentence was small, firm, and precise. The room shifted. Marcus's face did not show panic, it showed calculation. Marcus tried to steer the conversation back to me, using old patterns I recognized. Short, practical sentences, a lean away when the subject grew personal, the attempt to make me small. "Evelyn, you know the trouble, this is messy. Tell us what happened." He used the word messy like a tool to finish me. I felt anger rise, not the rhetoric of anger, but a physical tightening in my hands. I reached for my journal, the worn leather notebook that had held decisions and lists and quiet shame. Marcus's briefcase, the polished leather one he'd carried since we lived together, sat on the floor near his feet. He fumbled with it as if searching for something to prove me wrong. While he distracted the room, I slid my hand inside the briefcase's open pocket. I did not tell anyone. I acted. My fingers found a stack of printed pages and a small envelope. Inside the envelope were Polaroids, some of them moments that matched the ones I had found on my tile, and a few small notes in Marcus's neat handwriting. The notes described where he had placed cameras and what times he had followed me. He had written down the routes I took to the market, the time I left the building, and the neighbor I spoke to on Tuesdays. The handwriting on the notes matched the stroke pattern of his signature. "Marcus," I said, pulling the journal partly out so others could see it too. "Why do you have photographs of me in your briefcase?" He tried a measured laugh. "I kept them for clarity," he said, "to remember what happened." Detective Alvarez leaned forward. "These papers show someone surveilling her, Mayor Reed. Do you have an explanation?" He did not ask the question as a courtesy, because the folder in his hand had moved suspicion onto Marcus's behavior. Marcus's fingers curled around nothing. He searched for a line. You know I worry. You know how we are, Lena interrupted with an edge. Don't use we to erase what you did, Marcus. There was a rapid exchange then. 3 quick lines where voices clipped, and the kitchen felt like an assembly. Marcus, I wanted to know the truth, Lena shot back. You wanted control, Detective Alvarez. Who else knows about this surveillance? The 3 lines were short and sharp, and they carried the kind of intensity that clarifies whether someone will be believed. Emotion shifted again in me. Suspicion had moved to fear, then to a brittle clarity. I read one of Marcus's notes aloud. It, camera south facing 10:12 p.m., confirmed. Evelyn exits building. Hearing his handwriting narrate my movements made the room tilt from accusation to evidence. That was a small twist I had not expected. The idea that he had prepared the scene he now used to accuse me. Marcus's face changed. He set his jaw and reached into his coat. He pulled out a slim USB drive and said, "There's more. I can show you everything. I can show you that this wasn't set up by me to shame you, Evelyn. It was someone trying to pull both of us apart." Detective Alvarez took the drive and connected it to his laptop. He scrolled, eyes moving fast. These images are staged in places only someone who had access to Evelyn's apartment would find. Her chipped mug. The scratched tile near the counter, he said, but the upload path shows someone rutted the images through a rental device and then used a burner account to move them. Whoever did this wanted it to look like an external intrusion. Lena looked at Marcus and then at me. Evelyn, did you ever notice anyone hanging around the stairs? Anyone who shouldn't be there, she asked. I thought of the night I found the first envelope, I said. 2 nights ago I found an envelope under my door. I thought it was a prank. I thought it might be, a joke. Marcus finished for me. The word with a soft, possessive cruelty. Detective Alvarez closed the laptop and said, "We can trace the rental pick-up location and the dry cleaner that processed one of these jackets. We will follow those leads. Right now, I need to document what we have." He looked at Marcus and then at me. "One more thing. Whose handwriting is on these notes?" I held a Polaroid up to the light. The grease of someone's thumb smudged one corner. "The photograph showed me from behind at my own sink," I said. "The handwriting looks like Marcus's." Marcus snapped. For the first time that night, he raised his voice in a manner that sounded like anger rather than calculation. "I kept records because I thought you were hiding something that would hurt us both," he said. "I was trying to protect you." "You don't understand the choices I made." Lena's response was immediate. "Protecting you by putting cameras in your stairwell isn't protection, Marcus. It's control." Her rhythm was different from the detective's, blunt, personal. She had watched me for years. She was not going to let him obscure the truth with platitudes. The conversation slid into a faster back and forth. Marcus tried to explain the entries were notes meant for his memory. Detective Alvarez demanded proof that Marcus had not mounted the cameras himself. Lena demanded to know who in our building had access to Marcus's keys. I spoke when I had to, in short sentences, naming what I saw and what I found. At one point Marcus reached across the table as if to take the journal from me. I closed my hand on the leather cover and stood up. My knees were steady. I felt something change in me that had nothing to do with other people's judgments. A refusal to be gaslit in my own kitchen. Marcus moved to block the doorway. His movement made the air between us physically smaller. "Give me the keys," he said. "No," I said. "Marcus." "No." I pulled my hand into my coat pocket, fingers closing around the small set of keys I carried for my car and the spare apartment key. The action was deliberate, to keep what belonged to me. He lunged. The reach was clumsy, urgent. I moved faster because animals move faster when cornered. My hand pushed past his, and for a moment our shoulders hit. The table trembled. Detective Alvarez took a step between us. Lena's voice rose. "Back off, Marcus." He stopped. His chest heaved in a way that showed effort but also calculation. He did not escalate physically further. He let me take my keys and my journal. That moment, small and sharp, felt like a pivot. I had taken an action, not a promise. I chose movement over the stasis his manipulations tried to keep me in. Outside on the stoop, the air bit at my face. Dawn gathered at the edge of the street like a thin strip of pale. Detective Alvarez explained legal options in concrete terms. Filing a report, securing restraining measures, evidence chains. Lena offered to let me stay with her for the day. Each offer was a set of practical steps, not a speech. I listened and made calculations the way I always had, practical lists instead of rhetoric. A new emotion surfaced. Relief braided with residue of shame. Relief because the proof sat in the briefcase and on the detective's laptop. Shame because someone I had loved had taken notes on my life. That shame did not soften into a grand lesson. It translated into a single choice. To leave now with my journal and my keys, or to stay and allow the pattern to continue. I sat in my car on the curb and opened the leather journal. The page where I wrote lists had my handwriting small and neat. I wrote one line, leave before noon. The sentence was not a manifesto, it was a logistical decision. I turned the key in the ignition and did not start the car. I sat with the engine off and watched the sky go paler. Detective Alvarez came out and stood by my window. You did the right thing securing evidence from his briefcase, he said. We will follow the chain on the devices and the rentals. There may be charges depending on what those leads reveal. He did not promise to repair what had been taken from me. He outlined the next steps and timelines. Lena placed a thermos of coffee in my lap and said, take this, then go. We'll call you an hour from now. Her voice was practical, not sentimental. It felt like scaffolding. I sat with the coffee and watched dawn wash the street in warm ambers the way my kitchen light had earlier. Inside the cup, steam rose and the smell of coffee mixed with chamomile, the scent I keep on my scarf. I closed the journal and slid it back under my arm. I put the car in gear and pulled away from the curb. At a red light I turned the journal open to a blank page and wrote another line. Call the detective at 9. I folded the car key between 2 fingers until the metal bit my skin. That small, concrete set of acts, call, go, secure, was what choosing myself looked like in the first hours. I did not leave with a speech. I had no declaration to make and no epiphany to announce. My decision was a sequence of movements. Gather belongings, document evidence, accept shelter, and follow the detective's instructions. Those were the modest tools of change I had learned to trust. When I parked at Lena's building, I took the journal from the passenger seat and slid the thin gold locket open. Inside was a faded photograph of my sister at 22, smiling with a chipped tooth. I did not trace the photo. I put the locket back and locked it with my thumb. Lena met me at her door and said, "You did good tonight, Evelyn." Her words were short. She handed me a blanket and a pair of slippers. I left the journal on her kitchen table, where the morning light fell across its cover. That simple act of leaving the journal where someone else could find it felt like an extension of what I had done. Remove the private thing from manipulation and place it in daylight. Detective Alvarez's call came at 9 precisely. He read a list of next steps. Subpoenas, camera logs, witness interviews. If I wanted to press charges now or wait until they had more evidence. I chose to wait while they gathered proof. I don't need revenge, I said. I need safety. The phrasing was practical, not grand. The final twist revealed over the next day was small and sharp. The rental camera had been collected by a courier whose record showed a stop at Marcus's office before the night in question. The dial on one Polaroid's edge matched Marcus's salivary trace. The forensic chain tied his fingerprints to one of the camera mounts. The proof did not make forgiveness easier. It made the path away from him inevitable. That evening I packed the rest of my things into a duffel bag. I did it in methodical sequences. 1 drawer at a time, 3 items in each pile, keys, papers, photographs. The act of packing was an exercise in fact, gathering and motion. When I closed the door behind me, Marcus stood in the foyer as if to block my way. He did not speak at first. Then he said, "Evelyn, please. You don't have to do this alone." I looked at him, and I said, "Marcus, you watched me. You recorded me. You decided what my boundaries were." The sentence was neither melodramatic nor pled. It was an accounting. He reached for my arm. I shrugged away and pushed past. The door closed, not dramatically but definitively. I walked down the steps with my duffel and my journal. Lena met me at the sidewalk and took the duffel from my hand. Detective Alvarez stood a few yards away with his notebook. Marcus stood on the stoop behind the building, an outline against the light. I climbed into Lena's spare car, feeling the seat press against my back like something practical and bearing. I opened the journal once more and wrote 2 lines. File report, change locks. Then I wrote, breathe. The last line was not a promise. It was an instruction I gave myself to follow. Outside, the city moved with its ordinary noise. I did not make a speech about reinvention or destiny. I made a phone call to the detective, followed his directions, and went to a shelter Lena had arranged for the day. The chapter of accusation and counterproof closed with evidence on a desk and keys in my pocket. I kept the journal with me every step, not because it would save me, but because it recorded the precise actions I had taken when choices were moments rather than slogans. When I lay on Lena's couch that evening, I opened the journal and wrote, I chose leaving. I chose myself in small acts. I did not finish the sentence. I closed the book and turned the page. Outside, footsteps passed on the sidewalk. Inside, the lamp cast a warm circle around the journal. I did one small, concrete thing before sleep. I locked my phone and turned the key of my new apartment rental in my head, mapping the locks I'd change and the calls I'd make tomorrow. That list felt like a plan. It felt like work. The chapter ended not with a speech, but with a key on a table and a closed journal under a lamp. I had moved from suspicion to fear to clear action, and the proof that had been presented against me was now in chain of custody. The last decision had been an accumulation of small movements. Pull the journal from the briefcase, take the keys, refuse the choke of someone else's control, step into the night. That sequence closed the immediate danger and opened a practical set of next steps. I did not declare a new self. I packed a duffel and followed a list. That was enough to change the course of my life.